Hey everybody, one of the most common phone calls I get and one of the most common questions we get is how can I buy a condo in Puerto Rico? If you're interested in purchasing a condo using financing in Puerto Rico, then this video is for you. All right, so you're interested in purchasing a condo. Let's look real quick at the pros and cons of buying a condo. And this is going to apply to Puerto Rico, but really applies anywhere you might be considering buying a condo. So number one thing to keep in mind is that condominiums are obviously a form of shared ownership. And so there's a good side and a bad side of that. The good side, probably going to see less maintenance because you're paying through your HOA fees somebody to cut the grass, trim the trees, clean the pool. Number two, probably gonna have better security or at least have good security in place. In Puerto Rico, that tends to look like, maybe gated access to the parking area. There might be a security team that's on staff 24/7. So that could potentially be helpful. Oh, and security cameras. So those kinds of things are typically in place in a condominium. You're also gonna have maybe better access to amenities. So, maybe if you can't afford the single family home with a pool, but you can afford the condominium with a shared pool. So you're gonna have access to a pool, maybe a gym, those kinds of things. Also, condos tend to be in a little bit busier areas or areas that have more stuff going on, right? So if you want to live close to the beach, if you want to live close to restaurants and shops, condominiums can provide that for you. And so these are some of the benefits, right? On the flip side of shared ownership is going to be the HOA, right? Homeowners Association or condo association might steal your soul slowly because it's basically a group of people that get to tell you how to live in the place that you own. So, they're going to have noise restrictions. They're going to have restrictions on when you can do things and how loud you can do things and who can come visit you, how many visitors you can have, where they park, those kinds of things. And so you just got to hope or do your research and make sure that the condo association is a good one, that they're proactive, but not too proactive, right? They're not sticking their nose where it doesn't need to go, those kinds of things. But definitely on the flip side of condo ownership is going to be some less privacy. And because of these things, they can be a little bit harder to sell. So they tend to sit on the market for a little longer than a single family home. So those are the pros and cons, right? Let's look now at the top 5 tips that you need to know about purchasing a condo with financing, right? Like with a mortgage in Puerto Rico. So the number one tip that you need to keep in mind when purchasing a condo in Puerto Rico is that because they're a form of shared ownership, the lenders see these kinds of loans as inherently a little bit more risky. And why is that, right? Well, because it's shared ownership, as we mentioned, basically one bad apple can spoil the bunch. And so you have, one person who's not paying their dues on time or not paying their dues at all. And that creates a burden on all of the other residents. Or if somebody's really irresponsible and, drives their car into the gate, well, now everybody has to, that person's likely going to have to pay for it. But those things, those kinds of costs can affect others. Or if one of the neighbors is loud, or if one of the neighbors, wants to use their condominium for short-term rentals and then sets it up as a party palace for people. That's gonna really affect other residents in that group. And so for these reasons, lenders consider that condominiums are a little bit riskier. And so for that reason, you're gonna see a little bit higher of interest rate on if you're purchasing a condo. Also, that's just if you're purchasing it for you to live in it. If you're purchasing it as a second home or an investment property, you're gonna see a hit to the rate because it's a condominium and then another hit to the rate for it being a second home or investment property. So those are things to think about, is that it's a form of shared ownership. So the lenders think it's a little riskier and they roll that risk into the rate. All right, so you've decided that you want to purchase a condo. You're okay with the pros and the cons. The next tip, number 2, that you need to think about when you're buying a condo in Puerto Rico and also anywhere, but especially in Puerto Rico, it gets a little tricky, is if the condo is so-called warrantable, okay? Warrantability of condominiums has to do with if the loan itself, right? Like when the lender puts a loan on a property, they want to, they don't just sit with the loan like that. Most lenders are gonna bundle all these mortgages that they've made, bundle them all together, and then they want to turn around and they want to resell them back to the US government. They want to sell it to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, which turns out are not real people, but they are government entities that purchase mortgages back from lenders so that the lenders get cash back, and then they can turn around and make new loans, right? So we want them to be able to do this. But things got a little tricky with warrantability because in June of 2021, there was a super tragic condominium that collapsed in South Florida. You probably saw it on the news. It was, it's like the third largest structural failure in U.S. history. It killed 98 people. Super, super tragic. Well, the government and a lot of entities went and investigated, and they figured out that some of the big reasons that happened was because of deferred maintenance, and that they had, they couldn't do maintenance because people hadn't been paying their dues, and people weren't paying their dues because the HOA wasn't really tracking people down and making them or encouraging them to pay. So it was a weak HOA. So it was this like domino effect. And another issue was like they determined that water had been seeping in to the concrete, and it corroded the structure of the steel in there, which, as you can imagine, in Puerto Rico could also that could be a factor here too, because if it can happen in South Florida, it can happen in Puerto Rico. It's kind of similar types of geology. Okay, so but anyway, the warrantability is a specific set of criteria, and I don't have it memorized here, so I'm gonna refer to some notes. But there's a whole bunch of criteria, but the big ones are, one, no entity can own more than 20% of the units. So that's one, right? So like a big, Airbnb company can't, or short-term rental company can't just come and buy up half of the units and rent them out for short-term rentals. It could only be if one entity owns more than 20% of the units in the condominium, it's not going to be considered warrantable. Number two, at least 50% of the units have to be owner occupied. So you can't have more than, even if it's a bunch of different owners, if half of those owners or more are short-term renting them out, like vacation rentals, or using it as like a second home, not as their primary home, then it's not going to be considered warrantable. The next criteria, main one to keep in mind, is that the HOA, the condo association or homeowners association, cannot have any active litigation. It can't be named in any lawsuits at the time. If it is, not going to be warrantable. Can't get a conventional loan for it. Next, that fewer than 15% of the units cannot be behind on their dues, right? So the finances of the condominium are important. If they have enough in reserves, for example, need to have 10% at least in reserves for maintenance or for a special assessment if there's like some damage that happened in a storm, for example. So those are the main criteria. You might be thinking, oh my God, that's a lot of stuff to show up and ask an association manager, and you'd be right. So at CoLab, that's why we'll do it for you, right? So we will, once you complete our application and we can tell that you're serious about making an offer or going into to purchase a condominium, we will do those steps for you. There's a condominium questionnaire. It's a standard federal document. You can Google it and find it. Be careful though, there's different versions. You want to use the most up-to-date version, because if you use an old version, you're gonna have to do the process all over again. But anyway, we send that questionnaire to the association manager, and hopefully get their collaboration to complete it, send it back, and then we send it to a condo revision teams at our lending partners, and they will look through the information, the criteria I mentioned, plus a whole bunch more, and they decide, is the condominium warrantable? Will they allow putting a conventional loan on one of those mortgages? And so, it's a bunch of work. It can be, and so it's a bad sign if one, the association manager doesn't answer your phone, right? If they never answer the phone, that's going to be a bad sign for warrantability. We're not going to be able to figure it out without their help. Two, if they answer but they tell you something like, "Oh, that's not my job. I don't deal with any of that stuff. Go bother somebody else." Also going to be a bad sign. So it's a good sign if they answer the phone. It's a good sign if they say, "Oh yeah, I'm familiar with it. Send me the form and I'll send it back to you." Those kinds of things are going to be good signs, indicating that it's more likely to be a warrantable condo. Because, if that association manager is, consistently having to help people with purchases and they're filling out the forms, that's a good sign that people are able to put conventional loans on those properties. And so, but you don't have to worry about that. If you're working with us, we'll reach out and we'll get that set up for you. So that's tip number 2, warrantability. It's a big one. So make sure that either you're aware of it and that you know what questions to ask, or you can have us help you with that process once we've got your application. Tip number 3 is that certain loan programs, namely FHA and VA, they have their own lists that they publish that say, okay, we will lend and we will guarantee mortgages on these specific properties. And so, unfortunately, Fannie and Freddie, they don't publish a list of condominiums that they've already identified as being warrantable. So, which presents kind of a challenge, but thankfully FHA and the VA, they do publish those lists. And I put links in the description to the actual sources where you can go and search. You just type in, you select state, Puerto Rico, and you can even select a specific municipality or town if you want to kind of like hone your search in, and that will generate a specific list of condominiums that you could use FHA loans or VA loans to purchase. Now, a note about that, just because it's on an FHA list or a VA list does not necessarily mean it's going to be warrantable for a conventional loan program, right? Because there's government loan programs and then there's conventional loan programs. But it would be a good sign, right? If it's on the FHA list or if it's on the VA list, that's, I would say, an encouraging sign, but it's not necessarily going to translate to, it's definitely warrantable because I found it on this list. But, potentially you could go with FHA. So anybody can get an FHA loan, potentially. And VA, obviously, you have to be qualified and have a certificate of eligibility. But that we can help with too. So that's tip number 3, is that FHA and VA, they publish these lists. Links are in the description, so check those out if you're looking for a warrantable condo or a condo that's at least authorized by FHA and VA. So now you might be wondering, okay, but what if it's not warrantable and I really, really want it? Well, that's okay. It's okay under most circumstances. So at CoLab, we have options for that, right? So we have loan programs that are to help people purchase non-warrantable condos. However, keep in mind, as we were talking about before, if it's non-warrantable, the lenders are going to see that as a little bit higher risk. And so it's going to require a specified loan program, and that risk is going to get, you guessed it, rolled into the interest rate. So the rate will be a little bit higher too. And the terms of those loans are also going to be a little bit more conservative from the lender's perspective. What I mean by that is it will require more of a down payment, and you're going to see a little bit higher of an interest rate, but that there are options. And there's options also too, if you want to purchase a non-warrantable condo for a second home, like a vacation place for yourself, or an investment property, there's loan programs for those things as well, even if it's non-warrantable. So tip number 5, the most important tip that I can offer you if you're coming to Puerto Rico to purchase a condominium, or if you live in Puerto Rico and want to purchase a condominium, is that the condominium has to have what's called master policy insurance. In Spanish, it's going to be called Póliza Maestra de Seguro. Sometimes it's referred to as bare wall insurance. It's the insurance that covers all the common spaces, the walls, the outside structure, the pools and other common area stuff. If your condominium complex is maybe like brand new and doesn't have that set up yet, or it's just like really small condominium complex and nobody ever got that insurance, well, then it's not only is it not warrantable, but we're not even going to be able to use a non-warrantable loan program to help you purchase it, right? So finding out if it has master policy insurance is going to be a very important step. At CoLab, we'll do that for you, right? So especially once you've completed an application and we can tell that you're serious about making offers, that's something that we do routinely. I reach out to association managers and ask them for those policy documents, which can be a challenge. So keep this in mind. If you're trying to purchase a condominium, the timeline could be affected by getting the policy, and B, updating the policy, because that policy not only has to exist, but it has to be updated with the buyer's name on it, and the lender and the loan number. All those things have to be updated on that policy so that at the moment the deal closes, it's already insured, that there's already, they're already paying and linked into that insurance plan for all the common spaces. Because, from the lender's perspective, if, you sign the documents and then there's an earthquake and something happens to that property, I mean, heaven forbid, but if that were to happen, well, then it's not going to be fully insured, because then who's responsible? The person that just sold it, they're gone, and the person that just closed on it, if there's a gap in getting that insurance in place, well, that could that could produce a problem, right? So it's important to make sure you factor this into your timeline, because it can take extra time to A, find out if it's warrantable, B, find out if they have master policy insurance, C, get those documents, and D, get the documents updated, right? So we can help with that. So let me know if that's something that you're interested in. So lastly, guys, please, if you're interested, you want to know if you're qualified to purchase a condominium, whether you've already identified it and found it, or whether you're just thinking about it, go ahead, click the link in the description, answer the questions. It's painless, it's free. It's not going to be that hard, I promise. And I'll reach out to you and I'll be able to tell you with a free financial analysis, are you qualifiable for purchasing a condominium or any type of property? And I'd be happy to help you with that and coach you with that. So anyway, guys, thanks a lot for tuning in. Like and subscribe, drop me a comment, ask me a question, just whatever you do, let me know how I can help. But thanks a lot for tuning in, and I'll see you guys next time.